People coming from C also always are looking for the what they call the ternary operator. This, where
Hmm.
there's a test here, and then value A or value B. So they want Bill to be equal to value A or value B based on the test. It's a nice shortcut one-liner. Well, you can use that the equivalent of the or and the and. You can do this. That's the same thing.
Hmm.
So there you go, a little snippet. Never thought we were going to talk about that, but it came up. So ternary operator in Lua. All right, so we tried to load it. The first time we load it, it's going to be blank. The dump function will print it out. It'll say there's nothing in there. It'll give the name of the table and say, hey, there's nothing in there. So what do? I want to set a score value, which is a random thing I wanted to do here for the example. So my setting score is equal to whatever used to be in there. Let's see. Oh, here we're doing it. I'm doing the ternary operator right now. So I check to see if it exists. If it does not exist, or if it does exist, I set it to whatever's in there now plus 10. So in other words, if the score exists, add 10 to it. If it does not exist, set it to 0. So the first time through here, score will not exist, we'll set it to 0. Then I do another table dump, and now we'll see that there's a value in the table. And finally, I will save it. And I'll use the table save extension, which I wrote and added in SSK. And the code is available in this download. And it will simply save the contents into a JSON encoded table. So just to cut to the chase here, the way we do this is we use JSON encoding to translate the contents of a table into a text value that we can simply write to the disk or read from the disk. So we JSON encode it, write it to the disk as a big long string. Then we want to get the data back. We load it. It's a string. We JSON decode that string, and the JSON decode, I'll show you the call in a minute, returns a table, which then my function returns. Actually, it does a few other things to verify that the data is good. I provide also another function for massaging the data. Sometimes what can happen is if you're storing data in your table where you're using numerically indexed fields and string indexed fields, if you JSON encode that and then JSON decode it, everything will be string indexed after that. And that's not what you want. You want your numerically indexed fields to be numeric again. We talked about this on a previous show.
And all of these files are being saved and loaded from the documents folder, so they are persistent between app
Right. By
running.
default, table load and table save uh, use the documents folder. If I wanted to, I could say system.temporary directory, for example, and that would now look in the temporary directory. But my function by default looks in the documents directory because that's the most common location
Right.
to save and restore data from. So let's
I,
take a look.
I
Go
tell you,
ahead.
everyone will say one thing before you move on. There is what I'd like to see here is that all of this is wrapped up in sort of one line of code. I mean, when you're talking about the dot load and the dot save. I mean, there's all these other things, all these other operations that are going on when the data is either being loaded or saved. But those are all wrapped up in a library somewhere else that you've written. So not only does it help you customize the processing of the data to ensure that you get the result that you want, you're also cleaning up the amount of code that you have to write or include inline in the application. I like seeing that because it makes things easier to reason about, makes it more fluid when you're looking at the code, and you don't have all that stuff is not all in line.
Right.
So nice
Yeah, no,
stuff.
that goes to the point that you made earlier, which is I found myself, well, I knew because I'd worked on other game engines, etc. before, that it was a good idea to have a library of your own. I immediately started writing my own library, which was SSK. But as you said earlier, it's always better to bundle up what you've got and not write it twice. I've said before
Yes.
on the show that I'm a lazy programmer, in the sense that I don't like to do it twice. And just so people will look at the code, but I won't uncover it. But line 30, table dump. Line 29, my settings where I load it. These 4 or 5 lines of code, depending on how you want to count it, will, if you did this manually, will fold out to over 100 lines of code.
Yes.
So why write 100 lines of code when you can write 5 lines and you know that you got it right because you got all the bugs out previously?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's the documents folder. I just wanted to demonstrate that there's nothing in it before we run this the first time. I'm going to go ahead and run this. I know it's a little bit hard to see because I can't make these bigger, but let's just run it anyways. And you'll see right away that the code ran, we did the save, and boom, my settings JSON showed up in the documents directory. And I'll show you what's in it in a moment. But before we do that, let's just go back through the code. So my settings loaded, table dump. The first dump we see here says table dump. A couple of lines so I can find it when I'm looking through the comments. It says empty. That means there's nothing in there. And then I have this little comment that prints out here. It says my settings after load. My settings after load. So I know that's the one that is here. I make a change. I initially, because it didn't exist, I set score to 0. And then I do another dump of the table, and it says score equals 0. Let's see. My settings after increment. So that's my settings after increment. Then we did a save. So let's take a look at the contents of the file. It's pretty simple. Basically, it looks a lot like a table because this is a very uncomplicated one. But you'll see some that have square brackets and some other things. You know, it's great if you know how to edit JSON encoded tables on your own, or you already know JSON. Super. But I would not specifically, I wouldn't mess with these unless you know exactly what you're doing, because if you mess up the format of this and you try to load it later, the JSON decoder will throw up. It will be unhappy. So, which is great if you're trying to learn. But anyway, so it's very easy to read. It's all on one line of text. The more things we put in here, the longer this line would be. But it would all be one line of text. All right, so let's go ahead and run it again and see what happens. We ran it again. Now, after the load, it says it was 0. And then as we remember from the code, when it exists, it adds 10. So we added 10. Now, if I go back over here and click, Sublime is going to update, and we'll see what's in the file. Boom, the score is 10. So we saved it, and it's been updated. So we demonstrated there that we were able to save it initially, and then retrieve it later, and modify it again, and save it again. And if we just keep doing this, keep running, now we have a score of 110. It's the easiest game in creation. All I got to do is reload it. And I got an idea for a game. Simplest game ever. Just keep reloading the game. Better than a one-touch.
And it shows an ad each time.
Yeah, an ad each time before the game starts. You know, get you prepped. You got to give me something for that score. Okay.